How can I get better at what I do? I recently came across an interview with Alex Honnold, the free solo climber. He free soloed El Capitan in the Yosemite. And he said something very interesting. He said that his training has a lot more purpose, and he's training with the goal to get better at achieving his goal. And I want to talk about this a little bit because it really applies amazingly to the hedge fund industry. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's July 15th, 2020. This is Krim Delco. The markets are still open. We are down about 3%. The market is up about 0.5%. So we are up about 129%, and the market is down 0.5% for the year. I just want to jump right into it. This is an episode that is very, very important. Please remember the purpose of this podcast, of the Not Even Wrong podcast, is to give people a feel for what it feels like to run a hedge fund, and self-reflecting on your goals and how to achieve your goals, how to get better at what you do is absolutely key in this process. I do it every day. I do it all the time. I just don't talk about it all the time. I don't want to bother you guys every day with my self reflections, but it's unbelievably important. So, how can I get better at what I do? The purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in technological disruption with social impact. This is the purpose. And the goal is to achieve this goal, I have to reflect on myself. What am I doing to get better at achieving this goal? So let's unpack that a little bit. Social impact. What does that mean, social impact? I think we all have a different idea of what social impact means. I want to go a little bit further and digress. I have a simple rule in my life, or in life in general, and I preach that to my son, my wife, everybody I love, and I would like to get that going for them because it's very simple. There's two things in life you need to focus on. One, don't compromise on your value system ever. And number two, survive. Now, I hope it's clear from these two rules that they are sometimes in conflict with each other, and that's good. I think that's good because that they need to be in conflict. They need to keep each other in check. With keep each other in check. Well, if I say never compromise on your value system ever, well, what does that mean? Like, let's say you have a value system which says, I need to protect a lady which is attacked by somebody. Yes, of course, you need to step up and protect. I'm a martial artist. This is my absolute duty as a man to go and protect somebody. But let's assume I'm in LA, I'm sipping my coffee, and there's five guys coming out of a massive, Camaro or some GM car, and they have guns and tattoos, and they go and disturb somebody. I'm not going to step up and go and get killed. So what am I going to do? I'm going to sneak out and call the police and stand by to help them if there's something I can do. But I'm not going to. I need to protect my own livelihood before I can do good for others. I have to raise a son. I have a wife that I love, and I have other loved ones in my family and friends, and I can't just die because of my value system. I'm not a martyr. So once that check is done, once I know, okay, if I do this, I will survive. Well, then I have to go and protect my value system. Now, what does it have to do with with social impact? Well, my social impact is very much driven by my value system. I highly recommend John Haidt's book, Righteous Mind. It talks about how we create value systems out of our emotional system. So values are very inert in us, emotional. There is some nurture, there's some epiphenomenon there, meaning it comes from outside, but a lot of it's from inside. What that means is that if I tell you I want to protect the climate, you have an inert reaction. Either it's good or bad. For me, it's a good thing. I want to protect the climate because for me, value system means the answer to the question, what am I going to do next? And what am I going to do next has to be something that I can constantly ask myself. So I can't do something that, for example, is not regenerative, that is destroying the world or destroying somebody's life that I'm related to, because if I do that, there will be an end to that, and that's not good. So, for example, for us, social impact means if Tesla can get us off fossil fuels, that's a good thing. We consider that a good thing, and therefore we are happy to invest in the company. Now, technologically driven disruption, what does that mean? technologically driven disruption means that the disruption per se is a good thing, and it's technologically driven, so it's not driven by something else. Now, most disruptions are driven by technology, but sometimes it can be driven by culture. You know, the hippies disrupted the family system in the US. That wasn't necessarily technologically driven. So I'm just saying, very often disruption is driven by technology, and we are focused on that. So why is Tesla a technologically driven disruption? Because they're using R&D and science, and most importantly, iteration to A, develop better batteries, B, develop better AI, and 3, develop better manufacturing methods to deliver more value to the customer. Those are technologically driven disruptions. Disruption, and I've spoken about this many times in this podcast, in our view, is directly related to the cost of iteration. So if you have a purpose, if a company has a purpose, and on top of that finds a way to iterate constantly and do that in a cost-effective way, then I think we have the ingredients for disruption. So this is, in a nutshell, what we mean with technologically driven disruption with social impact. It's something that has technology under its hood and a purpose, and if you combine these things and you can iterate at a low cost, you can disrupt the status quo and generate value, in a sense, in a Silicon Valley sense, 10x better, 10x cheaper. This is, of course, not a mathematically precise formula, but it just means, listen, we want to deliver value, not just incrementally, but we want to be 10x better and 10x cheaper. And that's what we expect our portfolio companies to deliver, and therefore also our portfolio to grow, and therefore we expect to generate wealth. This is how we expect to generate wealth. This whole idea leans very much on Clayton Christensen's work. If there's one spiritual father for our fund and for our thinking, it is Clayton Christensen, with his ideas of disruption, ideas of economic growth. Economic growth, according to Christensen, always goes back to disruption, because you cannot generate growth any other way. And you know, this is beyond the scope of this episode, but disruption really is the mother of economic growth and the wealth creation that capitalism should bring to the table. Now that I unpacked the purpose of the fund, now let's talk about how can I get better at pursuing this goal. So number one, in order to refine my value system and also cross-check my value system, I have to read books. It sounds very intellectually, maybe some might think, oh gosh, really, that's all you've got? But let me tell you one thing. Reading books is a lot more than you might think. Reading books is, the way I think about books is, there is a multiverse of ideas, and we have access to those ideas through books. And I don't care what you call it, a book, a podcast, a YouTube video, it's all the same. When I say book, I don't necessarily mean that hardcover thing with paper and written stuff. That is one way to get access to ideas, and that's the way that I use the most. At any point in time, I'm reading 3 books. One audiobook that I'm listening to, one book that I'm reading to on the Kindle, and one physical book. I just figured over the years that works really well for me. Certain books, for example, I'm reading Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus. That is a very, very difficult, precisely written German book that you can't listen to the book. You need to read and reread pages and things like that. I'm reading another book on the Kindle. It's Some Assembly Required by Neil Shubin. It's a book, I like to read these nonfiction, technical, pop sci type books on the Kindle, because they're not that easy to listen to. The flow is not that it's not flowing. It's not a lot of narrative. I like books. I like to listen to books with narrative. So novels, I love to listen to. Or actually, I listen to, right now, I'm listening to Douglas Hofstadter's I Am a Strange Loop. And that is, it's a book about thinking. It's a book about the theory of the mind and consciousness. And it's a very, very beautiful narrative. So it's possible. It's not the easiest book to listen to, but it is possible. So what I'm saying here is, read books, get inspired, change your thinking, challenge your thinking all the time, because this is the best way to refine your value system, which you need if you want to have social impact. You need to refine your value system. You need to make sure You're balancing on the right rope. Now, technologically driven disruption. How do I get better at spotting disruption? This is probably the key in my business. In order to generate wealth, I have to spot disruption. Let me give you examples where I was wrong. For example, we invested in Twitter 5 years ago, and we sold at a loss, and we still think Twitter is a very bad investment because we thought Twitter is a disruptor. Well, it's not. There are a few things that Twitter doesn't have that we think are very key. And the fundamental thing which Twitter doesn't have is a clear purpose. There's also the cost of iteration, although not very high, seem to be much higher than they should be. The company is not iterating enough or very inefficiently. And I would also question the winning mentality of Jack Dorsey as a CEO. And there's not enough winning mentality in the company. So there are those types of ingredients that we consider very important are not given with Twitter. So this is what I mean. You have to be very good at disruption. Another disruptive company we thought is disruptive and ends up not being disruptive was GoPro. And you might think, oh gosh, what a disaster. You invested in that company. Yes, we did, because we thought GoPro can become the gateway to video on social media. Turns out that, again, there was no winning mentality in the company. There was no iteration or no efficient iteration, although they tried, but it looks like they weren't able to. And most importantly, the purpose of the company was, although very good, it was to find something along the lines like express yourself in digital form. We thought that is something that people want to do, but the delta between their purpose and what they were doing was way too high. And then in the end, they got competed away by Apple. We just did not see the threat of the competition. And this is one of the main things in disruption. Disruption is the theory of competitive response. And while we thought that nobody can respond to GoPro, we forgot to look at other people who actually don't even know that they compete with GoPro, but they were in the business of putting them out of business. And Apple was exactly that, because Apple's main focus was on making the cameras better in their phones. Now we know that. Back then we didn't know that. So you always have to be on the look for competitive response, and it doesn't always come from incumbents that respond to your actual disruptive force. It could also come from a competitor that doesn't even know that they're competing with you, and those are the most dangerous ones. So what is disruption? How do I get better at disruption? Well, for one, we're looking at many different places where disruption happens. For example, science. Thomas Kuhn's book about the paradigm shifts in science is a book about disruption in science. Neil Shubin's book about the big transitions in biology is a book about disruptions in evolution. Malcolm MacIver's theory of how we developed intelligence, the biggest disruption of all times, which is the growth of intelligence out of nothing, which is also along the lines of Douglas Hofstadter's the Gödel, Escher, Bach, and I'm a Strange Loop, where he's trying to explain how does consciousness, how does the I, the me, intelligence come out of things which don't have that, i.e. comes out of chemistry and atoms. I spoke with Philip Goff, the philosopher who talks about panpsychism. His idea is that there is consciousness in everything. It's just that it's an epiphenomenon that starts becoming visible at higher levels, such as humans. So what I'm trying to say is I'm looking at it from all different kinds of angles. Again, this is maybe a cliche. Look at it from different angles, but it is absolutely important. For example, let me give you an analogy. My son is a goalkeeper, and he's always thinking about how can he improve his jumps. And while there's a lot of training for jumps, one obvious thing to do would be to take a ballet class. Why? Because they train jumps. They're not in the business of catching balls, but they train the same thing. And maybe he can learn something about jumps that he would never learn from a goalie coach. So what he's doing, or what I'm suggesting he should be doing, is exactly what I'm doing. Try to look at the same thing from a different angle. I spoke with two scientists, neuroscientists that work with music and that try to understand what makes hits or disruptive musical compositions. Like, well, what is it? How do they happen? So I'm looking at it from all different kinds of angles. And this, in my view, is the best way to go after our goal, which is to generate wealth by investing in technologically driven disruption with social impact. It is number one, refine what social impact means for us, be very clear about it by reading books and understanding our value system, refining it. Number two, getting better at technologically driven disruption. So for that, we also, by the way, have to understand technology. We educate ourselves all the time. We educate ourselves on biotech and CRISPR. We educate ourselves on quantum computing. We educate ourselves on lithium-ion batteries. We educate ourselves on AI, on supervised learning, on reinforcement learning, on GANs, on the latest technologies which are out there, which could be a driver for technologically driven disruption. And yeah, this is really what it comes down to. And then we hope that over time we can, through iteration and knowing where we have to iterate, which is key, knowing where we can train to get better at what we do, I think that will help us to reach our goals. Thanks.